Okay, friends, hi, and welcome to our continuing, I almost have to laugh, cosmic fire in depth. The whole thing is depth, but we'll try to deepen the subject. So, I just want, yeah, just want to say hi to Risto and Veronica and Anna Sklar, and Ann Parker, and Annette Ebbett, Georgina Sprague, hi, and Heike Bobart, and Karen Gritzka, welcome, and Marina, who is a guest here, yes, and Martine Dupont, and Mayra Santos. Hello, everybody, and Nesa, and Susie, nice to see you, and Tia, uh, Vivian, and Yvonne, um, welcome. And Zenaidi also, and Catherine, I assume from, I assume from Australia. Okay, I've just been working on it. It's been taking hours. I managed to get, I think, a more stable computer, but I'm not using it right now because it's still requiring hours to make the transfer of materials from this one to that one. Well, we're dealing with eight points, and I'll be switching back and forth between what Starling Hunter gave to us in terms of his collection of triangles, and then what is said. Oh, wait a second. Excuse me. I'm on the wrong program. Uh, I'll be switching back and forth between my own notes on a treatise on cosmic fire, which I think are quite detailed and maybe worthy of study, and then maybe a little more spontaneous approach um, when it comes to um, the actual text from Alice Bailey. Um, Now, let's see, I don't want to repeat too much. We are on page 84, roughly there. The mythic land of exceeding fertility, of abundant luxuriance, and of phenomenal growth, vegetable, animal, and human, would naturally be where prana is received. And we're talking now about the different places where prana is received. It is the esoteric Garden of Eden, the land of physical perfection. Surface radiation demonstrates after distribution as planetary prana. And then it goes on to talk about man and the reception through the spleen, and there's a distribution over the entire body. And it demonstrates as the health aura. So we are now comparing, and let's see how I do here, a number of Okay, now you should be seeing a little different thing, but it's the same, only different. Starting from page 84, 85. So we have here a tabulation concerning the entities which are involved in the reception of prana and what they do with that prana. Now, I really, it would take a day even to go over this section in the kind of depth that it deserves. But anyway, the very first one is about the solar system. And the entity is our solar logos himself, a great heart center in a cosmic logos. His whole body of manifestation is the solar system. Um, Under its um, supervision and in inclusion. And there is a receptive center. Now, where is this found? This is a good question, and it seems to be, well, it says here, the pole of the central sun. Now, we have the choice of going all the way to the cosmic mental plane and calling that the central sun, or even beyond, or we can simply say we are dealing with the sun as it is and its particular pole. In each case, there is that point of reception which gives tremendous vitality from other and higher sources. So it's, where is this pole of the central sun? Well, I have some things that DK talks about that maybe will give us a hint. We know that the inclination of the sun is much smaller than the inclination at some 23 and 2/3 degrees of the Earth. But the actual axis of the Earth may not be where that pole is found, but closer to a magnetic placement, which is more vertical. But we're not quite there yet. Okay. So the surface radiation or emanation is solar prana. And what is produced as a result of this surface radiation, the movement produced by this vitalization, is called systemic rotation. Now, we're not just talking about the sun itself rotating in a period of some 27 days or so. We're talking about the rotation of the entire solar system, about which Master DK has some interesting things to say. I don't know if we've thought about that our entire solar system is actually in the process of rotation, and that there is a kind of obscure mathematics which DK alludes to and says he won't say much more, and then he gives us kind of an approximate figure, and we'll take a look at what that is. The distributive effect of the vitalization that we're talking about is called solar etheric radiation. And like all the other types of atoms, and the types of atoms which are particularly focused upon are the solar atom, the planetary atom, the atom man, and the atom of substance, the distributive effect is always greater. And in other words, it affects a larger context. In this case, this distributive effect of the stimulation is felt cosmically. And I suppose if he uses the word cosmic and not the word systemic, then he's talking about the cosmic logos. The cosmic logos that has a name which we have, with which you can be familiar, the 7 solar systems of which ours is one. That's our local cosmic logos. Now, I've been pretty careful. Of course, this has been going on over years since I first ventured out to teach cosmic fire in various places, United States, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, getting things started. And I tried to be as exacting as possible. Now, so occasionally I will read from what I wrote in the commentaries. I'm not going to try to be dull about it, although, that may be the effect. But I'll read every once in a while one that is germane or useful to think about. So it says, our sun, this is number 122, our sun rotates on its axis, approximately once every 27 days. And that is a number, for people astronomically inclined. It can be correlated with a sidereal lunar return. When the moon comes back to its own position, it takes about 27 days. But systemic rotation, as I was saying, suggests the rotation of an entire solar system, and this rotation occurs in a period of approximately, get a hold of this now, 100,000 years. Now I will read from DK, finding it necessary to jump ahead, far, far ahead, in Cosmic Fire, a treatise on cosmic fire, for this particular quotation. The he says the solar atom. Remember, that's the atom that he tends to consider uh, the last and largest of the atoms that he considers in detail without necessarily mentioning um, atoms beyond, other than mentioning atoms beyond that one, such as the cosmic logos and the supercosmic logos, um, and also the one about whom naught may be said. He mentions those things, but the detail is spared for four types of atoms, which, and this is a different way of thinking. Four types of atoms: uh, solar, planetary, human, and the atom of substance. There are probably other kinds of atoms, and when Jinara Jadasa, who was president of the Theosophical Society at some point during the 20s, he wrote his book, First Principles of Theosophy. He dealt with this idea of spirille and with minute particles, maybe we can call them atoms, called the bubbles in the koilon. And the number of bubbles assembled determined the kind of atom with which we were more conventionally dealing. Okay, now, the solar atom, he says, must be considered as pursuing analogous lines of activity and as paralleling on a vast scale the evolution of the planetary atom. Well, our planetary atom is pretty much our planetary scheme. And then, of course, we have those types of atoms, not much discussed, which could be chain atoms and globe atoms. But they're right in there playing their part. So, let's just say we're always looking for analogies and correspondences. If we push them too far, well, then we're going to have a definite error if we push them too far. But at least we can get started with the law of analogy and a somewhat tougher and more demanding law, the law of correspondences. So now DK goes on to say, the entire solar sphere, the logoic ring pass knot, rotates upon its axis. And of course we don't necessarily know the inclination of that axis, but it rotates upon its axis, and thus all that is included within the sphere is carried in a circular manner through the heavens. Now, this is not the same as a revolution around a central source. This is rotation in its own right. And I'm sure that except for what Master Decay is giving us, we, I think, would have no idea that this is really occurring. The exact figures, he says, of the cycle, which covers the vast rotation, must remain as yet esoteric. That means there's some manner of derivation and some exactitude of numbers which it is not yet advisable to confer upon the intelligence of modern man, both selfishly and unselfishly inclined. He goes on, but it may be stated that it approximates 100,000 years. Now think about that. And the law of mutation, and think about the possibility of varying perspectives due to this rotation. 100,000 years approximately. Being, as might be supposed, controlled by the energy of the first aspect and therefore of the first ray. Now, we may remember that in terms of the cycles of the various rays, the first ray cycles are built up on 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, and so forth. All those ones. And to give you an idea, even once in a century, another first ray indication, the great conclave meets, and it's coming up very shortly, in under 4 years, I do believe, at the Wesak time. So the approximation of 100,000 years in that type of rotation. Now, when it comes down to the level of planetary atoms, maybe the figures are a little more manageable, but let's see. You can understand that when in the compendium of powers, or siddhis, Siddhis, which Keith Bailey, for one, assembled, we do have the different kinds of cities grouped according to different planes. There's something very monadic about this type of rotation. And here I'm just filling in a few things. The etheric radiation is related to the wider context. The distributive effect is felt cosmically. Always it is felt in a larger context. Okay, and well, I don't want to get into what I've written before too much, because you can study that yourself, and if something of interest comes up for you, or some kind of questioning, then you'll make note of it, and maybe we can discuss it. Well, I'm so tempted to get into the more exacting type of language that I used hitherto, but I'm going to refrain from that temptation. Now here is the very same thing found in the text itself. You can understand that it depends on what kind of mind you have, really. Some people, when reading Cosmic Fire, and I suppose just a little bit, concluded that it was just like, and may I interject, just as dull as a 19th century botany book classifying everything. So there's a lot of classification going on here, and we're also going to see that with regard to the Deva kingdom, if we can get that far. Okay, so here are the comparisons. Systemic rotation, but for the planet, the entity is the planetary logos. Now, that's a bit more than Sanat Kumara. Sanat Kumara is an emanation of the planetary logos, and the planetary logos informs the entire scheme of a planet. So let's say our particular planetary logos informs the Earth scheme, and in a way all the other chains and globes as well, but with moments of concentration at different times in time and space, and those periods, when they occur, depends for accuracy of assessment upon what's called all knowledge. Well, obviously, to you and to me, it can't be all knowledge. It can only be knowledge within a certain context. And that context is that of the solar system and maybe a couple, excuse me, a couple of the cosmic planes. What is the receptive center? Well, just the way we had the pole of the central sun being the receptive center, we have here the planetary pole. But as I say, that pole of receptivity is not at all necessarily exactly surrounding the axis of the Earth. It could be much more perpendicular, and a planetary pole could be a different thing altogether than an actual inclinative pole. The surface radiation as the result of the registration is called planetary prana. Well, usually it's solar prana that we are pursuing, but planetary prana, which is involved with the pores of the body and so forth, um, is a factor to be considered. What is the movement produced? Well, we're familiar with the idea of rotation of these large spheres. Now, the entire planetary scheme, let's stick to Earth a bit, but the planetary scheme of any logos is somehow a sphere. And planetary rotation is what is stimulated. And the effect is the generation of planetary etheric radiation. And as always, this is felt within a larger context. So for the solar etheric radiation, we were feeling within the ring past knot of a cosmic logos, let us say. And for planetary etheric radiation, we're feeling that within the planet, including solar system as a whole. So, if something's called etheric radiation is coming from the Earth, then all of the planets in our solar system will feel that radiation. Okay, let's go back to what Starling has produced. No, I'm making a mistake there. No. Uh, what I have produced, and we'll go back to that. Yeah, Starling is, when we do the science of triangles, then his material is of great value. So, we'll look at this, and hopefully I will be alerted if you cannot see what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, the planet. We've just done that, and the rotation has to do with a specific planet with all of its chains. Now, you know the difference, don't you, between a planetary scheme, the whole thing, and planetary chains, of which there are at least exoterically 7. Maybe esoterically there are more. So a specific planet is now rotating. And the planetary pole is our normal planetary pole is more inclined than that of the solar atom. But still there may be a specific, more vitally etheric spot on the sun, which is called the planetary pole. Okay, so the location on or within the Earth perpendicular to the ecliptic and thus corresponding more closely to the sun's pole may have to be examined with respect to the reception of solar radiation. And this organ of reception is not designated as etheric necessarily. Okay, well, there's no big Master DK text inclusion for this one. Sometimes I think it's almost possible to learn more about the solar logos than it is about something nearer to us that we call the planetary logos. Now, we have interesting phenomena of actual poles where they can start to increase the degree of their inclination until, as it were, the top of their head is oriented towards the great vitalizing factor, or has even moved a bit beyond it. And when we talk about Venus, I think it's moved so far from north to south that Venus appears to spin in a different mode, from instead of from right to left, it may be spinning from left to right. Now, these are all solar systemic technicalities. Okay, so far we have a solar atom and we have a planetary atom. And since they are great spheres, we have no trouble thinking about the idea of their rotation on an axis. By the way, the Tibetan, you may remember, says there has been no true accuracy in any of these figures since a more settled Egyptian time. But lately, everything is in flux due to the initiatory process through which the Earth is passing. Why should the Earth or any planetary logos be neglected? All of them have to be involved. Okay. Now here it is. Okay. See, the exact mathematical location of these points of reception and the exact duration of cycles is not yet for our assimilation. We are only students of esotericism, and in case anybody doubts it, we are not yet the true esotericists. Now, the next atom is a human being. Have you thought of a human being as an atom? It's a living system with its own economy. So when we come to a human being, the human being is really a Daihan Chohan. And a Daihan Chohan is actually a monad, really. But sometimes we can say that it is a soul. In any case, the body of manifestation for the human being, considered as a high spiritual entity, is the physical body. But instead of having the organ of reception, or the major organ of reception on the top of the head, the way the other two do, the solar atom and the planetary atom, up near the pole, and the pole of man extends through the head. Instead of that, the receptive center is through the spleen. And he says some very interesting things about it. The surface radiation, or emanation, will be the health aura. Now, always remember that surface radiation seems to join in with a larger context. In this case, if you think about the tiny unit man and all who will be men, okay. So, the health aura is the larger context, however, to which this surface radiation joins itself or supports. Now, when you look at man, you wonder what atomic rotation can be. The distributive effect is the human etheric radiation, and it is felt by the environment and also by the hidden aspects of the environment. And I have some rather detailed thoughts here about whether the Diane Chohan is the monad, the human monad, who would be the truest form of thinker within the human energy system, or maybe it is the angel of the presence, the soul projected by the solar angel into the egoic lotus. They are both thinkers, but the soul or solar angel is far more proximate, far nearer than the human monad, vibratorily nearer. The spleen, as now you know the placement of the spleen, I think on the left-hand side. I believe so. Of course, that's the kind of mistake I can make to not having studied basic anatomy. I can make a mistake about whether certain organs are placed left or right. Now the question comes up, what is the atomic rotation of the human being? If we just look at the physical body, it doesn't seem to be rotating. Same goes for the etheric, and maybe some rotation begins with the etheric body, but not necessarily so. Certainly with the astral body and the mental body, there is rotation, but not uniform rotation as in the other two cases of the larger atom. So some kind of rotation can be detected because of the reception in the etheric spleen and the normal spleen. Okay. Some very interesting things here. The let's see. I hope I have this correct. I think so, or at least I should. Right. The larger context here is the environment. It's not cosmic, it's not wholly planetary. It is the environment, both obvious and hidden. Now, what parts of a man rotate? The causal body rotates in probably certain secret cycles. The mental body rotates. the astral body rotates. Now, does the dense physical vehicle rotate? We can make a case for the fact that since the outer physical body is built upon it and does not rotate, that neither the etheric physical, neither the etheric or the normal physical body rotates. So we are a assemblage of some rotating factors and some which do not. I mean, of course, we can, like the dervishes, we can turn around and around, but that is not really a true rotation. And finally, we get into the smallest of the atoms that are frequently considered. The entity is an elementary life, an atomic life. The body of manifestation is the atomic sphere. The receptive center is the pole of the atom, and there diagrams are drawn. You've seen Babbitt's atom. Now every time I say, well, look, I can't go on a big search for Babbitt's atom at this time. Although, you know, I'm tempted to do so. And if I keep on talking to myself, I just may do that. Let's see. If I deal with disk number D, well, it's not very. Now these are Tuya's diagrams, and I don't think that Babbitt's atom is listed there. I think under number D it may be listed. Okay, let's see. Here are the diagrams, and if I do this, Babbitt's atom, ToCF chart 11. Will I find it? I'm not sure. Maybe not, huh? Oh, here we go. I appear to have two of them. And, let's see if, there it is. All right. Now I will, use this as the diagram. Notice how very descriptive is this atom. Apparently Babbitt was a disciple of the Master K.H. But notice how the whole question of where we might have receptivity is pretty well diagrammed. Receptivity at the top of the atom at its pole, and then some kind of expression of that at the point of efflux, and he calls these torrents. And by a torrent you think of raging waters or of fast flowing energy. But when you're thinking about where the stimulation comes into the atom, especially as conceived in Theosophy, well then this is a pretty good diagram. And there are many spirille and many bubbles in the koilon, and this can be studied carefully. It says, the general form of an atom, including the spirals and the first spirille, together with influx and efflux ethers, represented by dots, these dots, which pass through these spirille. Now I don't want to attempt to get into some kind of really detailed analysis. And not only that, but I'm having a little trouble getting what's said on the bottom here. I don't know why, but I have some difficulty. Anyway, what's this all about? We have seen 4 atoms, and we've seen where flows of vitalization enter each of the atoms. Now, we have not seen this with absolute certainty, but we do have an approximation. Now, most scientists, except the theosophically inclined, and there are such people who are theosophically inclined in the sciences, would scoff at this kind of figure with its winding spirille, and it almost seems like spirille on top of spirille and bubbles in the koilon formulating these structures. Like, for instance, if you're looking at one of our normal etheric atoms of a human being, somewhere it says 14 billion bubbles in the koilon go to make up one of those etheric atoms. And the number of bubbles decreases the smaller the atoms become as we rise through the various planes. Okay, well, I just, I can't resist it. I wanted to, I know you've seen this, but it fits in with this question of where is the pole through which stimulation comes. And especially, I guess, what we're talking about here is etheric stimulation. Okay, now let me see if I can get back. That's always it's always an issue. Can I return? Okay, maybe I've succeeded. So anyway, an elementary life, um, and we have to look at what that might mean, the term elementary life. It's a tiny life, which nevertheless is part and parcel of the great universal logos, is the entity manifesting through the atom. The body of manifestation, the atomic sphere. Okay, now maybe we can call the atom a kind of sphere, given its radiation and so forth. The receptive center, of which we have seen a pretty good example, is the pole of the atom. And the surface radiation is always to the larger context. And the larger context here is the united health aura of the body. What is the movement? It's usually some kind of rotation, and how that particular atom that I showed you rotates, well, we've not been given that. And the distributive effect is felt within the physical form. That's the larger context. And so, I'll let you read the rest of this if you wish to. All of this has to do with, ultimately, with monadic living, or livingness. In the secret doctrine, it is suggested that electrons and atoms are monads coming into manifestation. If this is the case, the term monad must be understood in a special way. In any case, the idea of the elementary life has a monadic correspondence. An atomic sphere is a physical body, and all the atoms contribute to this united health aura. Okay. Well, that was not a lot of ground covered, but a very important tabulation according to the location of the etheric receptor in any atom. Where is it? And in the case of the human being, it's in a quite different place. The others seem to be more polar. Let's see what is said here. Well, this is another subject. This is about whether magnetism is a second ray phenomenon or a first ray phenomenon. And decay seems to assign it to a first ray phenomenon. If I be lifted up, will draw all men unto me. Hmm. If I be lifted up. Now, usually that is interpreted in terms of the Master Jesus, like if he's, or the Christ, lifted up onto the cross, all men, all human beings will have this devotion toward him and will accept the doctrines of compressed Christianity. But that's not what it means here. It means if I take the ascension initiation, which puts me in the realm of the monad, and if I go further and with that ascension and have the ascension of the liberated monad, uh, upon the logoic plane, and sort of sit symbolically at the right hand of the Father, that's going to be a further uplifting. We can begin to see how it is that the Christ intends to save humanity. So the next time we get together for this particular kind of work, we'll begin to deal with this very interesting idea of how a form disappears when the will to live disappears. Um, I've heard it said to some people, they say, well, I feel as if I'm going to pass over at this point. And came the wise answer from someone who knew more. Well, you won't go now because your work isn't finished. So this will to live has to do also with the completion of the intention which brought the incarnation into being. Now, I've done a little different method here today because of this very important tabulation. And I think the best thing to do is I think I'll move that down. I mean, I would love to go on. I really would, but look, David's work on the C groups um, is coming up. And that will be happening in 45 minutes approximately, and I don't want to, rain on his parade. I want to avoid any kind of collision that might happen there. Now, do I know everything that is here being said? Absolutely not. These are my best temporary, until I know more, speculations. And I'll just have to admit that they are such. So this is the end of program 59, and what did I have there before? 58, 53. They were separated by 5. So this one, uh, the end of 59 and 54, now probably at this point BL would jump in and correct me. Okay, well, it may be the case that I need correction. Because I just start to work on things, but now we'll begin next time at program 60, and well, yeah, it'll be group program 55, and oh, there's so much here. That's our issue. So much. So let's see where I am. I appear to be here, and I didn't do a lot of underlining in this section. I guess now if I suddenly disappear, lots of love to everybody, but I'm going to try something. Okay? And we'll see, okay, whether that worked or not. It appears to have worked slightly. This is the book. And basically, I did not do a lot of underlining, but did come to the 8th point. And we'll be talking about the will to live, and we'll be talking about when you die, which is the portal through which you pass, depending on your degree of evolution. Will you pass through the head center? Will you pass like the, well, he says sort of the ordinary human being of kindness and goodwill, through a temporary portal in the vicinity of the heart center? Or will you pass through the more commonly found solar plexus? And by the way, when you fall asleep consciously, there's a whole instruction about that in Discipleship in the New Age. You may find yourself exiting the body through the head, through the temporary portal of the heart, or related to the heart, or simply through the solar plexus. And that is something that DK wants us to pay attention to. He basically says, don't just drift off when you go to sleep. Pay attention. Be conscious when you go to sleep. Otherwise, when you die, that same drifting off will occur, and the value of the process will be lost, and the clarity will not come home to you. So we will pick this up next time. We're almost finished with the eighth uh, statement that he made, and we're almost ready to begin a new chapter altogether on the nature of prana. Now, if I go over here and yeah, and you see as we go down here, let's make sure that you are seeing this one. I think you are. Um, let's see if there's something that really tells about the death process. The exit in the head used by the intellectual type. Well, sometimes, right? By disciples and initiates of the world. The exit in the heart used by the kindly, well-meaning man or woman who is a good citizen, an intelligent friend, and a philanthropic worker. Sounds like, aspirants and men and women of goodwill and, in general, not negative, deluded people, although we're all deluded to an extent. And then finally, the exit in the region of the solar plexus. So there is much to say here, and yeah, there's so much in esoteric healing on the death and dying experience, and it can be linked with what is said here. See, I think it's very important to discover where the links are. You're reading something, and then something similar, but maybe from a slightly different angle, flashes into your mind, and you want to increase the light by relating what you were studying to the flash that came because of those studies. That would be a special a skill. I think by the year 2200 we'll be finished with this book. Well, maybe someone will take it on, one of the younger people, maybe take this on, and who knows what DK will write in the future. There's no reason to suspect that it will be watered down, and maybe it will be along the first ray line, because we've had 3 and 2 already, the historical, the psychological, and now the what. Let's see. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is open the, hope I know how to do this and that Michael can help me here
Yep.
with technical things.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, are there people that have any comments that you would like to make, any questions
As
that
far
you
as,
would
all, just
like to propose?
clarification about 10C groups. 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 10C groups
What the
Um,
10C groups is
yeah,
coming
this
up in a
tomorrow.
half hour. What?
Tomorrow.
Now? You're kidding.
Yeah, it's tomorrow at 8 p.m. GMT.
10C groups is now.
No, it's tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
Yvonne said she thought today was Saturday, so she's
Oh,
ahead.
gosh.
It's always good to be ahead than behind.
Well, I thought today was Saturday, too.
Hey, see, it's always good to be ahead than behind, because then you're like, yeah, I gave it
Uh,
away.
okay, well, you're right. Well, after all, it is tomorrow. Okay, so we're good. Okay, we don't have to. Well, David comes on once once a month, I think, and he always has something good to say, and it's good if we can take in what he says, just like we try to take in what Francis is saying about the secret doctrine and the secret teaching of all the ages. Friends, we're coming at this from a lot of different perspectives. And let's just say one of the things that would be of value is that we learn how to synthesize these various perspectives. Now, bit by bit, initiation by initiation, the synthesis petals of the egoic lotus, the energy of which originated with Buddhi, will begin to open, and our power of synthesis will grow until around the time of the fourth initiation, those petals burst open. I think that's what DK, how he describes it, and they become the revelator of the jewel in the lotus, uh, which is the great center of monadic will, as found within the egoic lotus causal body. And we're going to be learning, of course, more and more about that. Now, all of this is very different from what you're going to see these days in the standard esoteric bookstores. There's been a degeneration, I might say, um, in regard to the quality of the material. You know how also the early theosophists had a prejudice against Alice Bailey, who made the mistake when she was at Crotona, the Los Angeles Crotona, of being shown a picture of Master Kutumi and saying, "Oh, that's my master." And, well, then forever afterwards, she was accused of being glamored and having nothing worthwhile to say by so many theosophists. But I have known in the years of my study some deep theosophists who really saw what was going on and uh, really included Bailey in their presentations on theosophy. I did a lot of work at the Boston Theosophical Lodge and our faculty member and artist and well, knowledgeable man, Dwayne Carpenter. He was one of the ones who saw right away what this was and introduced with Theosophy also the Bailey material and maybe various theosophical lodges were more progressive than others. It takes a long time to let go of our uh, psychological cramps, our constrictions, our uh, tendency to feel safe with that which is erroneous and small but habitual. We have to grow out of that tendency, otherwise, the great principle of the continuity of revelation will not be acknowledged. Now, I've just been dealing, just last night, I think, with the reappearance of the Christ, and he will teach quite a number of things, but the continuity of revelation is one of the most important because that gives you breathing room to say, look, we only know a tiny bit, and we avoid the stultification of being shut up in a stuffy room, you might say, a room where you can't breathe. You know how it is. Sometimes it's a lot better when going to sleep to leave the window open than to just close yourself off with no circulation of air, oxygen, life-giving vitality. Okay, so we have to wait on David until tomorrow, and I, Tuya, maybe we have a freezing rain condition here, and trips to make. It's her father's 90th birthday. Hard to avoid that, but also quite dangerous. So I don't know that she would be back for this climate change discussion, but then we have our normal meditation on that, and we know how to think about it and can continue to think along those lines. Okay, friends, so is there anything you want to say or ask? Or is cosmic fire just too,
I think between identify and being and
cosmic
the
fire?
cosmic kiln, you're you're cooking them.
What do we got? Another wipeout, huh? How can I say, somewhat jokingly, that I know I've done my job if nobody has anything to say? No, actually, then I've failed. Um, there are just so many interesting things. We have to get our abstract mind going, and then we get our transcendental mind activated, and that takes place on the Buddhic plane and is akin to intuition. And we need to become familiar with a new, maybe new to us right now, a new vocabulary. Now, I don't know if these words from DK have always seemed like the most natural thing in the world to carry the kind of expression you would offer, but it was never so for me. I had to learn a whole vocabulary. I remember in 1971, 50 years ago, coming home from a long trip where I saw a Masonic opera called Die Zauberflöte, the magic flute. It really was keenly Masonic and Egyptian and all that. And I thought, well, I'll stop by Alcott on the way home. The big, oh gosh, the big Theosophical Center in Wheaton, Illinois. But they still made me reach for the Bailey books. Maybe if I got on my tiptoes and maybe if I stood on something, I could reach the Bailey books, but they didn't make it easy, you know? And that's the way it is these days. But I came home with those books, and 50 years ago, I really entered in. I'm sure all of us are faced or have been faced with their profundity, the sense of which only grows. So, any thoughts or questions? Otherwise, it's adieu for the day.
I don't know if Vivian wants to me to say this, but she says, I'm stalling with the thought that Adam may have created Eve from his spleen, not his rib.
You know, that sounds familiar to me, but I'm not. Obviously, there's a deeply symbolic meaning to that. Because, look, the division of the sexes occurred in Middle Lemurian days. Now, we can wonder who Adam was and whether he represented the entire human race and why he was given the symbolic privilege of creating Eve. There's something a little, unless it's explained in a manner I don't understand, something a little off about one of the sexes creating the other. And then, next time we're going to be talking about the spleen and the spiritual umbilical cord and so forth. But really, a man was hermaphroditic at first, and then came that moment, lasting a long time, of course, for the division into two parts. And along with that came the rise of mentality of man. So that's, I think, in Isis Unveiled, one of the earlier great books of Blavatsky, it may deal with that particular creation. Adam. There's even a race, an early race called the Adamic race, then the Hyperborean, and only then the Lemurian race, with the eventful division and the beginning of the whole initiation process. So I think I, for one, will have to think about that. There's a lot of research to be done on how the division of the sexes came about and why it came about. Obviously, the whole principle of polarity, of objectivity and subtlety came into focus at that time. And were we there? Well, maybe not all of us. Some, many, I think, were generated on the moon chain, and maybe a few in the previous solar system, the previous major solar system. But we all managed to find our way here by the time Atlantean days had begun. Some were able to skip Lemuria and originated on the moon chain. Others were present even before Lemurian initiation, Lemurian happenings, Lemurian cultivation of the human race. They were here even before that happened. So it's a whole specialized study. I'll just admit it, I need more study on the subject, for sure. Okay, well, thanks for the thought. It's interesting, and we'll see how it pans out in terms of what is said in various sources. Anything else?
Yeah, from Miri. Do you think the spiraling of these etheric energies might be contributing to the level of complaints of human beings having nausea, vertigo, and migraines lately in these planetary transition?
Well, that's quite a logical question, and I think that we have to have a bit of a handle on our causal cycles, rotations, our mental rotations, our astral body rotations. Of course, you know, it's a natural thing for this rotation to occur, and it's not like this, you know. It's not really a fast thing, but the exact figures are not really given. But you know, when I think about the dervishes, and I don't know how they do it, but they just don't get dizzy, you know. And yet other people, you may remember when you were a kid, if you go on a merry-go-round and push it really fast and kind of stay on it, immediately in one of my early grade schools, the image of the merry-go-round just flashed into my mind, and how wobbly one can feel when one disembarks from the rotary experience. But I don't know that it is unusual, or that there's been an increase or a decrease in the velocity of rotation. I don't know that. Now, if there were a major increase in the velocity of rotation, then, you know, some kind of vertigo thing might be more common. What can cause it? Well, there's let's say kind of an inability to handle the rotation and a failure to recognize that it is occurring. But more and more, men will know the cycles as part of all knowledge. And I don't foresee, well, let's just say we'll have a humanity with less tendency towards vertigo, disorientation. So, the ultimate thing there is we may have to wait and see, but it's not a new phenomenon. It's not just suddenly happening in a manner that is too fast for humanity. What is difficult is the lack of proper alignment with the flows of energy which determine the plan. That can make one dizzy, and we have to remember that as the etheric body, loaded with different energies, begins to make its impact upon the physical brain, first the etheric, then the physical brain, that can contribute to this vertigoic disorientation. So again, good question, and more to be examined about when one feels dizzy and what brings it on, how does it manifest. Those kinds of observations have to be carefully followed, and then we will know something more. But as I say, good question.
From Anne Veronica, she's wondering if you could talk a bit more about conscious sleeping.
Well, next time it's a long section, and if someone will remind me, we can go to discipleship in the New Age. Some people call it lucid dreaming, you know. But in volume 2, we can go to the encouragement by the Tibetan, literally, to fall asleep observantly rather than to just drift off. And apparently, if we are rightly polarized, we can witness the phenomena of the various planes as part of the falling asleep process, which is different from just having a dream. Now, a lucid dream means you are conscious of who you are, where you may be, wherever you may be. You wake up basically in the middle of remaining asleep. Some of us have had that happen, and you have to be careful about lucid dreaming, because if you bring in too much mental concentration, you can make the whole process just vanish. It just goes away as if it never were. So if I'm ever in a lucid dream, I just kind of relax and I absorb and observe where I am. You know, whether I'm flying or whether I'm in a tree or whether I'm in some remote place that doesn't even seem to exist on the physical plane, um, whether I've penetrated into what we might call, as Tolkien called it, Middle Earth. Sound familiar? It's the probably the astral plane, and all of those shires and hobbits and various phenomena of evil, uh, Sauron and the Ents. Are they the trees that move and speak, etc.? All of that seems to be, to me, Middle Earth or the astral plane. So we'll get into that, but it is it's not an easy section of the book, and when we read it, we will see most often how wrongly we have been following our own very normal process, and not at all the esoteric method of falling asleep. Dinah too will find it.
Okay, so the next question is I'll just combine them since it's both connected to the spleen. Susie asks, what are the ramifications of a damaged spleen? And Nasa asks, or total removal when it is ruptured.
Well, I think devitalization is one, and less adequate functioning of the source of prana. Remember, there is a pranic triangle, which is fundamental, and there I think I can maybe find that. Um, let's see. So that would be no. What book would that be? Well, it's probably a treatise on cosmic fire. Let's see. No, that wouldn't be right. Yeah, it is cosmic fire, but let me show it to you. Um, and here we go. Um, the Pranic Triangle. The shoulder center, which is not the same as the heart center. You can't see it yet?
No.
Can't see that. Okay. Oh yeah. Hmm. Well, there it is, outlined. Can you see it now? Outlined in yellow. It's not the heart center, but it is either above or below the heart center. And then there's a center near the diaphragm. It's above the diaphragm. And then the spleen. And you can see how it is that people at different stages of evolution will be controlled by this or that triangle. Now, very early first petal man, you know what I mean by that, first petal, he's working for however many millions of years on the first petal. Um, he's much controlled by the Pranic Triangle and not by emotion at all. But then along comes the Taurus petal, number 2, and the chakras involved are the base of the spine, the solar plexus, and the heart. And then man controlled by the mental plane, notice the solar plexus is right there with astral control. The throat center is right there with mental control. And then it just keeps on advancing. The heart, in general, is involved. And here we have a partial control by the soul, and this is advanced man, so we synthesize in the Alta Major center, and the chakras will be significant. And finally, we're members of the group that's going through probationary initiation. And all 7 head centers are involved, including the center of mentality, throat, and the center of love, which is the heart. At no time do we dispense with the heart thus far. And we can go all the way up to the 5th initiation, still including the heart, the 7 head centers, and the center at the top of the head, and I suppose the ajna center in the ajna series of centers. So that's an important area to examine. Of course, in explaining it, I managed to forget what the question was. Oh yeah, if the spleen is damaged, well, it will affect the prana, it will affect the vitality. If God put the organ there, I don't think some helpful surgeon should be coming along and saying, well, let's get rid of the spleen. I mean, maybe if it's ruptured, there's nothing you can do. Oh, let's get rid of those tonsils. They don't serve any useful purpose. And before you know it, we've eliminated some very fundamental aspects of the human anatomy that contribute to the general well-being and vitalization of the individual. Okay. Anything else?
Marina says, Marina says that dear all, as the kidneys channel of energy goes through the ears, and there also goes the gallbladder's channel. Vertigo and dizziness are its symptom of having fear, kidney, and stress, gallbladder.
Okay, well that's very interesting, and maybe you're studying esoteric healing in a more specific way. There's a book by Alan Hopking that deals with many triangles. Now DK pretty much warns us to be simple at first. There is a kind of a soul to soul healing formula. I'm not sure where in the book it is, maybe around page 100, that we are supposed to use before starting to manipulate many triangles. But if we really know what we're doing and we can bring balance to those triangles, then okay, it can be done. But there's a lot of crossover between what is said in this book, Cosmic Fire, and in the Esoteric Healing, uh, Esoteric Healing book. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
Now, oh, I see.
That's it?
Good.
Okay, that's it then. Okay, friends, well, we'll see about tomorrow. Um, uh, Whether, we have this climate change meditation. It's at the usual 8 o'clock time. I say without Tuya, it won't be as elaborate, but she's liable to be driving very slowly in freezing rain, and I wouldn't have her rush to try to make the program. So we will act as if we're going to continue with it. Meanwhile, I want to thank all of you for attending, and Michael for keeping us focused, um, and yeah, keeping me on the railroad tracks. Well, now it's a monorail that is coming in mostly. Maybe it's easier to stay on the tracks when it's a monorail. So that's going to be our intention. We will work tomorrow, um, most probably, and I'll let you know if otherwise, on some kind of um, work to help people continue with their good intentions that were generated at the United Nations conference for dealing with the problems of climate change, at least the problems that man causes. There are other problems which have to do with the initiation of parts of our planet, and about those we have very little to say. We just go along with it. So, I will, I think Michael will stay on a little bit after dismissing you. And let's see, where am I? Here. I know I'm somewhere. I should be somewhere. Yeah, okay. So basically, I'll stop the recording, and oh goodness, this has been on original sound quite a bit, so that means you probably hear me doing a bit more gasping and wheezing than I wish were part of the recording. I always have to check. I can't leave it on original sound, except if I were to be sounding ohms. And these days, the old opera singer can't sound ohms anymore. So I'll have to keep those off and need to be reminded about that matter. Okay,
Sounded
so
good today, Mike.
what's it, Michael?
Actually sounded good today. Like I was.
Oh, is that so?
It
Okay.
makes me happy when they're, the
What?
voice
Yeah.
does sound good.
Well, I'm faking it and pretending to be a little bit normal. Okay. Alrighty. Alrighty. So I'll stop this recording, and then I'll hang on, and you'll go elsewhere, and I'll just be speaking to Michael for a little while. So here we go. Lots of love, many blessings from all of us. Bye for now.